from lead gen to Gen AI, right? Closing the loop. And it can mean many things, right? And as we've been hearing, I had the opportunity to attend the session in the morning in terms of it was all about data, who owns the data, what will happen with DPDP, what are the security concerns, how do we handle data security, right? And then we had Sanjay talk about Gen AI is no longer the buzzword, and it absolutely is not. Every institution that we have been interacting with is leveraging Gen AI, and that's what we are going to hear from our my esteemed co-panelists here. And I'll do less of talking and let them talk, and then try and synopsize the hypothesis for you in terms. To just start with, in financial services alone, right? Gen AI, we're looking at the spend going upwards of $350 billion by 2030, right? And that's a huge number. And that itself signifies that Gen AI is rapidly moving from the proof of concept pilot stage to enterprise grade scaling, right? And that's where I wanted to actually give you a brief about what I learned. I had the opportunity to just do a sync up with my co-panelists here. So Shalya here is the CEO of Credifin, right? It's a very niche NBFC, which is super specialized, super focused on new to credit customers, right? And we have Anish Choudhary here, who is again doing a very interesting piece of work in terms of DPI. We heard a lot about DPI also during the day, digital public infrastructure. So Anish is the Chief Business Officer of IBDIC, which is a consortium of 18 banks coming together and trying to create a digital public infrastructure company, right? And we have Jitendra Agrawal, who again has been in insurance, has been in banking. I don't think, Jitendra, is there an industry that you've not worked for in financial services per se, right? So he brings in, he has the ringside view to everything. You talk about insurance, he'll be able to give you wisdom nuggets. You talk about banking, he'll be able to help us understand a little more, right? And the entire thing is, so we'll keep it free flowing if you're okay, gentlemen, in terms of the questions. And feel free to pick any question if you want to add on to the question, right? So we talked about spending, right? And given the topic started with lead, and it's all about growing the business today, because we're seeing the pressure that corporates have, right, on their net interest margins, on their return on equity, which is all about growing the business. And growing business starts with soliciting business, and soliciting business starts with leads, right? So what's your take, Shalya, if I may ask you to come in terms of how have you seen, because you're focusing on a very niche segment, which is new to credit and also not that digitally savvy. So would be interesting to hear your views.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. And most of the time when we talk about lead generation, we're always talking about new business generation. But in reality, just to give you a bit of background about myself, I've been a management consultant before starting my own NBFC journey to about 50 plus banks and NBFCs. So all the banks, you go to anyone, nobody would say that we do not want to retarget our customers. So when it comes to lead generation, it is not just about targeting new customers. It's actually way more important to retarget your existing customer base. The best way in the last 20 years that the whole financial ecosystem have actually been able to tap this is by putting 50 calls on your phone from different marketeers. And that's been the traditional sense of how lead generation has been happening, especially in the top-up loan category or second-time category. And we talk about increasing profitability, increasing valuations, and the biggest expense is actually customer acquisition cost. And if we can retarget our existing customers, so that's the zero CAC, and that's the way you increase the LTV. And I think a lot of people in the financial ecosystem have started realizing that we do not really have to focus on loan to value, but also focus on lifetime value of the customer. So coming from there, so there are two ways to look at lead generation. Again, as I said, first time new customer entering your books or your existing customer. So, we'll all talk about new customer entering, but again, let me just take a step back and talk about the existing customer for a minute. So, as an organization, we are again very focused on lifetime value. So, during this lead generation process, what we do, we finance e-rickshaw customer, which is essentially bottom of the pyramid, your microfinance customer category. And we do school fee finance. I'll take an example first and then I'll come to the conclusion. We do school fee finance. Essentially, there's very hardly any profit or yield for us, but it is a very good, space to be in. You're helping the economy, you're helping the children, and that actually increases your lifetime value with the customer as well, because this kind of a loan rotates every year for 15, 16 years, and that's the best situation. But at times it becomes very difficult for us to make the customer understand. So how do we use lead generation engine? We actually, for every event, for every product, for every kind of a customer, we're able to generate content which we can throw on their mobile phones. We can through SMS or calls or whatever way, because otherwise, for which I would need at least 200 people, right? So for example, if I have 40,000 loan accounts running in my portfolio today, and within a span of 15 days, I need to target them, all of them together, because it's the April month where you target these for school fee finance. Now, in this scenario, I can, at the time of first time credit, I can evaluate what kind of a customer this is, what profile he is, and basis that I can retarget. This person has 2 children, and he can upgrade his children to a better school. So we can throw him content basis that. Similarly, you mentioned about the car thing. We actually do that. We do use car loans now. So for every customer, we are not just creating कि आओ used car loan ले लो. हम लोग how we are targeting is कि take a used car loan for Hyundai Creta in Jalandhar, right? So just imagine if someone is looking for Hyundai car loan in Jalandhar, we are the first one that pops up for them. And if I have to put up the whole ecosystem to develop page in and page out, it takes too much time. So it is essentially, summing the whole thing up, it is essentially how you use the generative AI is to micro target the customer, understand their needs, understand at what loan cycle or for the second time users, what time, what product he needs. So for example, if I want to do a heater loan, and which is a very relevant loan for my customer as a MFI customer category, but may not be relevant for an ICICI bank, because they do not want to disburse a 5,000 rupee loan, but I want to, because my customer needs that. So I can do that only for them. And again, then if I have 2 different product categories, let's say mortgage loan, I would not want to do a heater loan to them. I might do a bundle loan. So for example, we did a loan of a bundle of 5 things, which had uniform finance, new mobile finance, laptop finance, for all the customers whose children were about to enter into colleges. So it's about looking at the customer needs, micro targeting the customer, bifurcating your platform in a way that you can say कि these many customers look fit into this category, and this is the kind of business or this is the kind of leads we want to push to them, and give them the content. वो सरकारी स्कूल छोड़ के एक अच्छे स्कूल में क्यों जाए, सेमी गवर्नमेंट में या प्राइवेट स्कूल में क्यों जाए? You actually have to explain it to this customer base why it is important. So that's how we essentially use generative AI, which becomes really helpful, and it solves 90% of a problem of manpower, as well as the headache of really coming back to the customer and servicing them.
That's very valuable, Shalya. And I think I think the Credifin customers are going to be extremely happy if you're not spamming them and you're using Gen AI to micro target and do specific targeted promotions. I think it's a welcome change from loan le lijiye, card le lijiye say, no, this is exactly your need. And so I think Gen AI is being used very, very incisively there. Jitendra, I would want you to come in here in terms of, given that you have had the perspective of looking at organizations from outside and also been inside organizations as well, like HDFC Life, etc. What do you think are the biggest organizational challenges that, in terms of embracing Gen AI, right? What are the top challenges that come to your mind?
So the challenges for any technology, whatever is there for a change, is essentially the same component which is there for generative AI as well. Now the question here is, for any change to really take place, what is the mindset? And that mindset, when you really look into, can be classified, which is pre-COVID and post-COVID. Now, pre-COVID, when all these digital assets which were being positioned or being asked for, the pace at which the security layers or the ROI questions which were there, possibly thanks to COVID, are diluting. It has started moving from a push to a pull proposition. So the change in that mindset has certainly taken place. At the same time, the pace at which some of those benefits which have been shown and brought to the table, creating a business with a scalability and continuity post-COVID, had created that these assets are now available as a proven technology. Now, combining these individual assets as a composite, how can they create a larger value is where the organization is really looking in. And at that point of time, the real challenge comes in is whether it is a technologically superior proposition versus it is a functional pull.
Yep.
So there is always a CTO who is trying to really research around and find out something which is happening around the world and is trying to really see how can that be pushed into the organization versus the functional head who is looking into the metrics, looking into the security layer and is trying to really balance some of those things, whether that person is giving that importance to that technology or is really looking into what really matters to my customers and how efficiently I can achieve it uh, m- uh, as an enablement of the technology. So I use only the incremental part rather than the whole, which could be really made as an offer.
Sure.
So the explainable part of an AI is something which is really having a positive and it is getting accepted. However, there are many more aspects of a buzz which is still there, which could be really either at a POC level or maybe feel good factor, and it is something only becoming a discussion point.
No, I think that's actually a very valuable insight in terms of that's where I personally I believe that organizations are moving to embracing a platform construct, right, where the business and technology stakeholders sit together, and jointly the platforms are governed so that your business benefits are exemplified and also the tech is scalable. And obviously, to top it up with the privacy and trust concerns that you spoke about in terms of explainability of the AI. So I would want to come to Anish. You can I just can you pass on the mic? Yeah. So given you have the most interesting role in a very new setup in the next 12 months, right? If you were to look at doing one Gen AI project which has the biggest bang for the buck, which would it? Which would that be? What are your thoughts?
I think the question, I believe, applies generically to the
Absolutely,
industry.
absolutely.
The difficult thing with human mind is it can only work on linear equations, not on exponential equations. And we all know AI is growing at an exponential pace, and every 3 months, 6 months, the flavors are changing.
Yep.
But having said that, one thing that I'm quite bullish on the way things are picking up is purely agentic AI.
Uh-huh.
Because the frontiers that it is really unleashing now is it's absolutely incredible, because what it is doing finally with enterprise AI, because so far what we've experienced with Gen AI has been largely around a lot of content generation and conversational AI and so on, which of course have been the building blocks through LLMs. But now leveraging these LLMs and transformers, etc., the agentic AI itself, the use cases that can come up are something that can really reduce costs, create a lot of value. For example, let me talk about 2, 3 use cases which can apply significantly. We had a recent instance of a fraud, which we got to know, right, of a relationship manager in a bank branch, which has been in the news. Now, if you have to prevent such instances, there are lots of checks and balances. But the question is, what is the behavior of the individual, right? Now, today, you have enough data. For example, just your laptop or a desktop, which your employee uses, the cursor movements, the amount of the typing speed, the change in behavioral patterns in terms of how the email responses have changed, and so on and so forth. There can be various variables out there. You can actually create a model and have anomaly detection that there's something amiss with this employee. Now that can be dovetailed into employee engagement, sentiment analysis, as well as vigilance. Now imagine that use case. How do you get deployed? Earlier we were thinking of it in the realms of data learning and science, but now it's possible. Just deploy localized SLMs you don't even need a full-fledged data lake. Wherever the data is coming in different data houses with the laptop and the servers, You just deploy some agentic AI, keep fine tuning the model, and within a few months you'll have it ready and working. So that is the power that's coming. Number one, and therefore, a lot of enterprise grade applications which were dependent on large scale deployment. I feel a lot. Just he spoke about micro targeting. I use the word micro deployments. It's much easier now to deploy even in enterprises smaller use cases without really going for a massive transformation. So yes, I'm quite bullish. There are lots of use cases on agentic AI. I'm sure we keep reading about them as well. But I think vigilance, and then there's so much that can be done as agentic employees itself, right? Moving beyond, for example, I have seen models at play and really powerful and scary at the same time. It can actually go to your LinkedIn page. Suppose how do you look at a LinkedIn profile while recruiting? Look at 100, 150 parameters. You can actually, make it work and track each variable and create an output and give you a shortlist. So a lot of these things which you could take hours and months can perhaps happen 10x, 100x faster. And it's real, it's going to happen soon, maybe 12 months. I say 6 months because after 12 months, there'll be a new theme which is beyond agentic AI that's going to take over.
I think that's
Can I add something?
absolutely, please
Yeah.
go ahead.
So, looking at the current state of the BFSI, especially the lending industry, one of the biggest challenges, again, that we've seen, in the last 6 to 9 months is the collection and the defaults happening in the NBFC space. So I think one of the biggest use case that, again, we are working on it, and we've actually been able to improve our mechanism at a collection efficiency of about 97, 98%, and out of which 80% goes to digital, which is first in its kind when it comes to micro industry customer base, is towards collection and how much money can an overdue customer really pay. This is one of the biggest use case, and I think an immediate use case which every institution need to focus on. So, for example, under the development that we have done, for every customer which would be in par, let it be 2 EMI overdue or 3 EMI overdue, we do not, the general mindset is ki go collect at least 2 EMIs, yeah, collect all EMIs from this customer. Instead of that, we have developed a system where we can actually assess basis his last 30-day earning. Because we've already fed in the profile of the customer, what is the maximum EMI that he can pay? So, let's say his EMI is 10,000 rupees. A customer, let's say in a tier 3 town, may be able to pay 12,000 rupees, but a tier 1 or a metro town can pay 14,000. And we deploy that and we train the team to go and just ask the customer for, let's say, 14,000 bucks. Don't try and collect two EMIs or 3 EMIs, which has actually helped us a lot. And I think this is the biggest problem that we need to solve today for different customer. What is the value that we can generate from it?
Makes sense. No. And I think what I would want to draw upon is hi. Anish brought a very interesting point, right? Agentic. And so Anish brought a very interesting point in terms of agentic, right? Leverage of agentic. And we're seeing all the financial institutions are struggling with cost to income ratios, right? And I would just want to reframe it into two dimensions. Agentic is to improve productivity. And also there is a skill element that we need to reevaluate, right? When we talk about agentic, it is also about dovetailing into the skill quotient. Because all of us, the narrative about AI taking jobs, etc., is done and dusted. Everybody knows that it's not, it's going to augment human intelligence. And how does the human leverage it effectively for their benefit is where the entire narrative and the play is going. Right? With that in mind, and here we had Shalya brought in very, very interesting aspect of collections, right? And again, the human aspect. The machine is churning out, the algo is churning out the entire output of how much to collect and what is the customer's ability to pay. But there is a human involved at the fore who goes and has this conversation. So I think that's overarchingly emerging the theme, right? With AI at core and human at fore, if I were to call it, right? That's the overarching theme that we are seeing across the industry. So, Shalya, I wanted to ask you in terms of the entire viable financial solutions, right? So, given Credifin, the segment that it operates in, right, and new to credit, new to bank, and obviously e-rickshaws, etc., the ticket size of the loans is extremely small. So how are you leveraging, how do you believe that you will be able to solve the trust quotient, right? Trust and transparency in the underserved segment, right? How are you going to ensure that the advisor, the feet on street, the Credifin feet on street, the inputs that is getting from machine is the right inputs? For what kind of governance controls have you put in place, if you put it?
It's actually a very large question. This problem comes in not at the time of origination, but during the whole journey, right? But let me tell you a very funny instance. This was during the first year when I started working in Credifin, and one of my executives used to go to the customer. His EMI was 24,000 rupees. He used to give him his salary slip and say कि ये देखो मेरी 24,000 सैलरी है ना उसने देखो कंपनी का नाम भी आ गया this is the amount and this is the PR receipt for your amount that you're handing over to me. And he used to collect 24,000 rupees from him, never deposited in the company's bank account. And this is a very funny thing which came out. How people can actually manipulate the system. And especially when you work with uneducated or semi-educated individuals, this is something trust is something that you really need to build up. uh, Let me take another example. For the last 6 months, whenever you call someone, there's only one thing that comes out: कृपया इस fraud call से बचे रहे. Right, this kind of fraud call is coming. And just to create a background, call centers have been the backbone of the BFSI space. Yeah, right. This is where every customer used to trust on. And today, this is the biggest fraud center, not just in India, across the globe. Biggest of the frauds happen through call center. People pretending to be police now. That's also started happening. So, what I believe, especially in my kind of a customer, and I'm very granular in that aspect, you need to create a physical to digital mechanism. For example, we have created a physical ID card of every customer through which whenever some activity is happening with that customer, right, it's like a debit card. I have it here with me. Okay, anyways, it's in some pocket. Uh, too many pockets. So we create a physical to digital card. It's like a credit card. So what happens is the customer would tap his mobile and he would get all the data that is happening in front of him. So let's say if one of my executive is in front of the customer, he'll get the data about this executive, if he's authorized to give him cash, if he's authorized to what kind of transactions he can do. So we call it a trust ID and a EMI ID. So those kind of activities every institution can initiate, through which, because executives keeps on changing. The average life of an executive in an organization is less than 1 year today. And phone pe to you can't even trust anything what is happening. So giving them a physical aspect to it, because I understand there are mobile apps. You might be using an ICICI, SBI, HDFC bank app, but everyone essentially has more than 100 applications on their phone, and they use about 10 of them. And if you think about this customer base, once they would log in, because our executives will go and force them to log in, create an OTP and sign on. In 6 months time, they will change the phone number as well. So having this kind of an ID always protects them. And that's what we have taken as an initiative, what we do. I'm sure there are so many intelligent minds here and out there who can develop even a better system, but to the quantum that we could do, this is what we have done.
No, I think that's very, very interesting, Shalya, in terms of how you are addressing the new to credit segment and how you are very incisive and focused on what you do and what works for your organization. And that's something that we're seeing increasingly a trend, right? To each one its own. Everybody is trying to use, and what Anish was alluding to earlier, SLMs and the rapid deployments, right? That's what is the power of Gen AI. Saying everybody can use it to their own advantage to solve their own niche problems. They have the data, they own the data, they can mesh the data and get it going. I want to come to you, Jitendra, in terms of when we talk about Gen AI, and we did hear in terms of business comes in, the technology comes in, you said there is always a little tussle and friction, which is anyways good in more ways than one. What do you think is the need right now? Is it technology, is it skill, or is it mindset? Where do you see this headed?
I think for any change to take place, technology is the leader and is actually creating the context and the need. for people to reimagine the business processes, come up with a need for re-engineering those projects, and reinvent the platform. So technology is always there. At the same time, it would evolve its own journey. And skill set to support that technology would also be developed. So it is something which is logical. It's not something we should be really worried about it. What we should be really worried about and pivoting would be the mindset. And that mindset actually decides the pace at which we want to really run and create that kind of a change or embrace that change. Whether that could be of incremental nature or it would be of transformational nature. That would be a function of am I really having a mindset of only ROI? And if that is the ROI mindset of a CFO or CEO, then innovation is not that agenda, improvement is the agenda. Let's run and be happy about it. Then let's not crib about it. If we really want to really talk about a perfection on a journey, rather than creating some kind of a early success and then creating a build on with a synergistic mindset, then obviously innovation would be a reality. Otherwise, you will still be standing with some of those pockets of excellence in terms of successes of POC, not creating in a scale. Then the mindsets, which could be like applying a brake and forgetting about the accelerator, rather than balancing them. That the brakes are equally important and then accelerator, and then go about it. Makes an organization really succeed on the innovation agenda. And there is always a push versus pull between the function and some of those early starters in any organizations. So bringing in a center of excellence kind of a culture, bringing a crack team, and going about it in terms of an experimentative mindset, actually make that thing happens. So maybe, as I said, mindset is the most important aspect which organization should be really building, nurturing, and going about, rather than just worrying about the technology. Technology will take its own pace.
I just want to chip in here. I think culture is something that it's very close to my heart, driving digitalization. I think we have a mindset problem, but of a different order. I'm not talking about organizational mindset. I'm talking about the people per se. What AI is doing is it's going to expose people who do not have enough critical reasoning skills or critical thinking skills. Number one. Number two, there was this concept of T-shaped teams. Some of us would have come across during our, agile methodologies, etc. I think there's all the more need to have T-shaped individuals who can handle a little bit of variety and at the same time go in depth. So there's a concept of M-shaped teams and T-shaped teams. But I mean, I'm not going into all the jargons. What I'm trying to allude to is, of course, people have to not only know their subject and domain well, but they also need to have the critical thinking skills to connect the dots, ask the right questions. Something that in Indian corporates, I'm sorry to say, has not been encouraged. Asking questions, knowing the right answer has always been favored over asking questions. Now, what it does is, if I'm doing a deployment, if there is a question on how to approach a certain software, certain journey, etc., you need to have design thinking at its core. Now, I see this as a beautiful amalgamation of how AI can make rapid prototyping, MVPs, agile developments. All these terminologies have been tried for the last 5-10 years, but with limited success or mixed success, if I may put it that way, because practicality versus constraints, they always take over between what the ideal should be. And you spoke about ROE, but I think now AI and all this allows you to experiment faster and also fail fast, learn faster. The question is, the only impediment, and I have always said this, that it's always been the mindset. It's not, the constraints were also because of mindset. Now people will have no excuses. And therefore, those organizations who manage to solve it better will have a significant competitive advantage over those who don't. So I don't see it only as an ROI or an ROE or an improvement problem. I actually see this as a 10x problem. 10x problem, your culture will decide. And I can tell you, and I interact with a lot of youngsters passing out of college. I'm seeing a divide. There are some brilliant minds who are just willing to experiment, get into deep tech, or figure something out. But there's a large chunk of graduates now who are very capable, by the way, but they are coming from a mindset where they do not, I dare to make a controversial statement out here, I do not see enough hunger. And our education system has not done enough service in terms of critical thinking. So you have to really bootstrap. The people who are saying, I cracked IIT, cracked JE, I spent 6 years of my life struggling, and now I'm into corporate first job. Are you telling me I need to unlearn and relearn? When will my learning stop? Now, that's a shock I'm experiencing in conversations across various pockets. I don't know what's the experience of other esteemed colleagues here, but we have an interesting problem at hand. And if we don't approach the mindset from this perspective, we'll have a problem.
But I think it's a very valuable thing what Jitendra said, mindset and culture. And you segued it into culture, Anish, in terms of how culture plays a key role in determining how organization is going to be embracing any technological innovation. Last question to you, and a very interesting one. If you were to redo the Yes Bank gig that you did, Anish, and launch the super app, the retail super app that Yes Bank did, with the advent of tools today available, what would you do differently?
So you're talking about the mobile app, super app Iris that we built. Look, I think the one thing that I'll pick up, because we all talk about engagement on an app as a big challenge, and I'm talking from a banking lens because some of the fintech apps and e-commerce apps have solved a lot of that. But in banking app, I've often used to say, number one, people love money, they don't love banking as much. And therefore, if an app has to be there, we try to put all products and all the features out there, but then the customer wants certain specific. I think what I figured out in the entire experience is two things. One, quickly, an individual would want the right set of hyper personalization in the app, and the journey has to be intuitive enough so that the customer doesn't have to think. The moment I have a thought, I know there's an answer lying there, right? To make that happen is a combination of a tremendous amount of UX research, not so much as UI, but UX, and also in terms of how do I embed my communications. Now, if I'll take a simple use case of AI out here, if I talk about communication on a banking app, I have to put a certain regulatory disclaimer or a certain, do's and don'ts or whatever as the next steps or nudges. There are hundreds of ways of designing that nudge as per the profile of a customer, including age, demographics. I'll not get into language right now, but yes, that's a possibility. So I feel it's a lot more easier to do now, because earlier, even if I had to do that, I would have to take a massive deployments for A/B testing. I needed a CDP actually, or a customer data platform as we call it in Martech, to get all the data in one place, and it's a huge, huge investment. Plus lots of specialists and dependencies on vendors. But now I can do all of that much more easily with local data sources, etc. So I think there's a fabulous amount of behavioral science experimentation that can happen with this, and I would perhaps some of the stuff that I had in mind could be relatively easy, I feel, in the model phase.
Sure. I think, thank you. That I'll just try and bring everything together of what we spoke, right? In terms of Gen AI is here and now, everybody knows that it's table stakes, and people have moved beyond experimentation, and it's a mindset thing, the point that Jitendra was making. And Shalya brought in a lot of practical experience of how he's actually using it in his own NBFC to uh, target customers and to retarget the existing clients as well. And he brought in the perspective of new to credit and new to Credifin and the existing to Credifin construct. And we had Anish talk about the how do you institutionalize this, right? How do you take it forward? What are the challenges? How do you circumvent those challenges? So I think it's all about people, process, and an operating model and a mindset in terms of how do you go ahead and change. That's all we had to offer today. Thank you. Thanks, Anish. Thank you, Shalya. And thanks, Jitendra. Thank you.